So as many of you know Delegate Tawana Gaines. She's the vice chair of the Appropriations Committee in the House of Delegates. She's also the chair of transportation in the House as well. So any transportation issues that come up throughout the state, MTA, SHA, those agencies come through her committee for approval of any funding that comes through her committee. So I will go along with, so from Delegate Tawana Gaines to the left of Delegate Gaines, well, to the right of Delegate Gaines, if you're looking on, up here, excuse me. We have Dennis Brady. Dennis Brady has over 42 years of experience as an electrical engineer and over 33 years of experience as a nuclear engineer. He's a U.S. Navy veteran. Mr. Brady has received degrees in electrical and nuclear engineering from North Carolina State University and Johns Hopkins University. He's also served as a member of the Bowie City Council for over 21 years and has been a past president of the Maryland Municipal League and the Prince George's County Municipal Association. Currently, Mr. Brady serves as the chair of the Citizens Against SC Maglev Coalition Steering Committee. Please give him another round of applause. Now, let me get this right. If you're looking on the stage, to the left of Delegate Gaines is Bill Boone. Bill Boone has 28 years of experience in geographic information systems and 30 years of experience in emergency management. He has worked in various fields related to GIS, including transportation GIS, disaster response, federal law enforcement operations support, and homeland security projects. Both Bill and Dennis are active leaders in the Citizens Against the Maglev Train organization. Please give him a round of applause. Okay, and then so we have Dr. Zhang, who's here. He is the Herbert Rabin Distinguished Professor of Civil Engineer and Director of the National Transportation Center at the University of Maryland College Park, my alma mater. Dr. Zhang's research focuses on innovative mobility solutions, urban sustainability, and next generation transportation modeling and decision support tools that are large-scale, real-time capable, and driven by big data. Got something for me? Dr. Zhang has published more than 250 peer-reviewed papers, 9 books and book chapters, and numerous technical reports. Most recently, he served as a member of the White House OSTP-NEC, a lot of acronyms, external panel on President Obama's 21st Century Clean Transportation System, and the Maryland State Transportation Innovation Council. Please give the doctor a round of applause. All right, so we're gonna, as many of you know, as I told you earlier, MTA and BWRR decided to not be here, so these folks are going to do their best to explain to us, tell us a little bit about the background of the maglev train, and tell us how the Citizens Against the Maglev defeated it in other areas, and then also just give us a little bit of background about what they do and how we can work together to make sure that this does not impact our communities greatly.
Thank you for having this forum or open hearing on this, and thank you for having Bill and myself here to represent the citizens. We've been working on this since, I guess we formed in May to oppose the maglev. In April, MTA had the first round of open houses at the end of their scoping phase. And the scoping phase asked citizens and residents and businesses and other people what issues they should look at when they do the environmental studies. And the two people that started this group, Aviva Navitsky and Lori Thompson, were shocked when they went to the Bowie open house and there were 16 people that showed up. Mm-hmm. And when they looked at the original map, they had 6 routes that devastated Anne Arundel County and Prince George's County, and they were horrified. And they started asking their neighbors, and no one knew about it. So we started working, came together, and the first impetus that drove us was the city of Bowie. the City Council of Bowie had a briefing by Dave Henley, the project manager for Baltimore Washington Rapid Rail, BWRR, on July 10th. And we spent the end of May through the beginning of July preparing for that. And we had a rebuttal program that we provided information that challenged some of what they were suggesting. They're proposing a high-speed levitation train that would go from Baltimore to Washington in 15 minutes with top speed of 311 miles per hour. They talk about the route ultimately going from Washington to New York, and your ability to travel to New York in less than an hour. And their ultimate goal is to go from Charlotte to Boston using maglev, which they claim to be a new technology, when in fact it's about 30 years old. It's old technology already. And in order to do this, they need to create new infrastructure. So we started to organize. Our group started in July. We had about 60 people on our Facebook. Our Facebook is called Citizens Against SC Maglev. And we use the membership as an indicator of the strength of our group. In July, mid-July, 4 months ago, we had less than 60 people as members. And earlier today when I looked, we have 2,722 people. All of that growth has occurred through word of mouth, by having people talk to their neighbors, and that's what we encourage everyone to do. In the fight against this, it's important to register your concerns, list your complaints about lack of notification, raise issues that you feel are important. I saw a sign over here about keep it wooded. Hold it up. That's a good point. The transition phase from above ground to below ground for the west, BW Parkway West, goes through a great wooded area. You need to be specific when you write to MTA and write to Federal Railroad, listing your complaints, asking that you be put on the official record. But you need to, if you just write and say, I think it's a dumb idea, you know, they'll accept your letter. And they'll put it in a little hopper, and they'll say, noted. But if you write and say, you know, on this wooded area, the city of Ringo planned years ago to preserve this, and that's wrong, they're going to look into that. If you know of a historic property and you identify it, they will look into it, and they're required to respond and investigate every issue and complaint and what have you. The scoping phase ended. We maintain that it was not properly done and it should be reopened. Their response is, it's over, but we will continue to include new issues as they are identified. So it's important to stay informed and important to stay connected with this and write to those people at Federal Railroad and at MTA that are doing the environmental study. But it's more important that whenever you write a letter to them, copy your elected officials. They need to know what your thoughts are when you contact them so they can act on your behalf too. I told you that first open houses at Bowie had 16 people. The October open house at Bowie State had almost 800 people show up, and there wasn't a single person that made a favorable comment on the project. The Laurel High School had nearly 500, and the Anne Arundel High School had almost 500. So the turnout for the second round was much, much better, and I think they're now getting the strong message that this is a project that is not wanted. I'll answer questions or what have you. That's kind of a synopsis of where we are today, but I will pass it on to, oh, okay.
Thank you, Dennis, appreciate it. Just a couple quick announcements that we've received from the building supervisor here. We do have 2 cars that could possibly be towed if you're told if you are parked illegally. So if you believe you're parked illegally, please go move your car. I'm just going to read the license plates: 3DA0987 and 6AP7869. And of course, as you know, we have still more information packets that you can take out as you go. But I wanted to make sure that no one gets their car towed today. and once you get back home safely.
Thank you very much. You know, I wondered why Alonzo asked me to be here, and then I remembered I do appropriations. And I've been known for fancy budget language. This project has never been presented to the General Assembly. I think the only thing they said was that it was a private project. I believe they got $26 million from the federal government. My belief is that federal money has to flow through the state, and that's why NTA is involved. Delegate Healy and I plan to have a briefing as soon as session starts next year. We'll be sure to invite every single last one of you. We'll use the joint hearing room so that there's plenty of space for everyone to have an opportunity to listen. As I said, I do appropriations. This would be a policy issue. So I know that Delegate Healy and Senator Penske are working on ideas to come up with legitimate ways of slowing the project down, if not altogether stopping it. I remember back in, I'm going to say 2002, 2003, this was a project that somehow was making its way through the General Assembly. And we were able to put the brakes on it on the conference committee, which is made up of 5 members from the Senate and 5 members from the House. 2 of those members, the project would have gone right through their district, so that was a no. And I was one of the members who agreed. It wasn't coming to Prince George's County, not coming through this district at that time, but we stopped it then, and my belief is that we'll be able to stop it again.
Just a couple of quick words about the mapping efforts that our group is doing. We have all of the data layers that we need in order to analyze all of the routes to find out what is impacted. We have, should I hold it? Right.
Mike, check.
We have all of the property tax information. So we have every bit of information about all the property parcels. We have all of the building outlines that includes garages and sheds that may be in people's backyards. We have every school, church, cemetery, recreation center, daycare provider, pretty much everything that you can imagine, every gas station, every shopping center. So what we're doing is, since the railroad folks would not give us their GIS files, we recreated the routes using their information. So we can go in and we can do this analysis that will let us know if your property intersects with one of the rail lines. So those are the types of things that we're doing. And we have, here's an example of some of the mapping products that we have. And we also have on our Facebook page, if you join the Facebook page, Citizens Against the SC Maglev, you will see on the left-hand side the word photos. If you click on photos and then go to the albums, you will see all of the maps that have been done up and down the line, and we're going to be adding more of those that will show different types of analysis in the coming months.
Thank you. Dr. Singh.
Hi, good evening. And again, my name is Lei Zhang. I'm a professor of transportation engineering and a director of the National Transportation Center at the University of Maryland. We are very proud to be the flagship university of the state and the backyard university of the Prince George's County. We are very appreciative of the support that the Prince George's County and its community has offered to the university. So when Delegate Washington's staff contacted us earlier to see if we can be here, have conversations and potentially answer questions to this community, about this particular maglev project. I said, hey, you know, we're very happy to be here. As the state's flagship public university, we normally cannot take side on a project unless we have thoroughly studied it. But at a university, we have some world-class expertise on related topics and study areas, including electromagnetivity, the propulsion technology, both for maglev and hyperloop. And we have done a lot of previous research and studies on high-speed rail in general, as well as its community impact. So I'm just very happy to be here to share what we know about the project and to be happy to answer any questions from this community. It's just great to see elected officials and community members get together to discuss a topic of clear importance to this community. And we from the University of Maryland are just happy to be here. And so in terms of my personal experience with the maglev technology, and it always started from probably many of you or your kids have taken physics classes, and when you drop a very strong magnet across a steel tube, it takes a long time for that magnet to actually drop to the ground because the maglev levitation caused, in terms of the interaction between the magnet and the electricity field, the magnet field generates electricity. So that's the very technology that actually support the maglev train. So it does not really touch the track, so it basically floats on the track. The SAM electromagnetic field power really propels and stops the train. So the main difference between the magnet technology and the traditional wheel-based. I'm actually pretty loud. Maybe I can just speak a little bit out of the back. Is that it doesn't have wheels. And so the first magnet project that actually put into commercial operation is actually a 19-mile long segment of maglev train between the Shanghai airport and the city center. The top speed is 400 kilometers an hour, which is about 250 miles per hour. Riding the train is an impressive experience, but the community impact is very complex. So if there are questions I can answer here directly today, I'll be very happy to do so. And we also have a lot of experts at the university next door. So if there are questions that take their expertise to answer, I will also be happy to pass on these questions to my colleagues at the University of Maryland, and then give the answers to Delegate Washington staff, who can then pass on that answer back to the community. It's just I'm very pleased to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we're going to have our other state officials, Delegates Healy and Senator Pensy, come up and just say a few words about the project and from their perspective and their vantage points in the state legislature. And you all can please give Senator Paul Pensy a round of applause. As you can see,
thank you all. Before I say a few words, you know, the 22nd District wanted to embark on this activity to give an opportunity for you folks, but Alonzo took the lead on pulling this together, and I think we'll thank Alonzo for doing this. Let me ask you a question. In the last 3 months, how many of you have utilized the Metro? Raise your hand if you've utilized the Metro. Okay, look around. I'd say it's about half the audience. Put your hands down. In the last 3 months, how many of you have used the Acela train to New York? Ladies and gentlemen, that's exactly the issue in front of us. Do we want to have a system that gets people to work, leaves cars at home? Or do we want to have a very high cost train that has small utilization? This is misplaced priorities. I don't have a PhD in engineering or in mapping. Hopefully I have an equivalent in politics. At least I put in a few years on it. Maybe an ADD, all but dissertation. But the point is, we have an underfunded metro system. And the administration, the government has been unwilling to commit to a revenue stream to make sure Metro is on firm foundation, literally and figuratively. You know, there needs to be upgrades, it's got to be economically sound, and a lot of the other jurisdictions are saying, Maryland, you got to kick in, and he's been unwilling to do that. And thousands upon thousands, hundreds of thousands of people utilize Metro to get to work, to keep the economy running. But now we're being asked to take on a project between Baltimore and Washington, which, you know, a cell is a couple $100. Who knows how much this would be? I mean, who would use it? Maybe bankers, maybe some elected officials. That's it. It wouldn't benefit the working and middle-income people of this region at all, or the Baltimore region. It's about politics. And as Alonzo said earlier, I mean, there's mass transit and there's mass transit. When tens of thousands of people are using it on a regular basis, and you can avoid cars and greenhouse gas emissions, that's mass transit. We should support it. Having a strong metro system here and in Baltimore and all the major cities. But yet we're being told to buy into this maglev. And even the governor occasionally says, well, it's mass transit. Yet, almost in the same month, he recommends adding lanes to the Baltimore-Washington Parkway, to the Beltway and Route 270, so there can be more cars going between Baltimore and Washington. It's a scam, and it's politics. It's not about science. It's about politics. Now, I'm not an expert in all the routine and the underpinnings, and it's being used in Japan. Japan, they have a similar system, not a maglev, but a bullet train in France and places in Europe. But to think that that's where we should be spending our time, energy, and money is simply ludicrous. You know, that it comes up in election year is another reason this comes up. Now, the federal EPA grant is fairly significant, $40 million? Okay, $27.2 million, and they say, wow, that's a lot of money to help us get started. The cost of this, as you'll hear, is in the billions, maybe tens of billions of dollars. Now they're saying private interests from Japan and other countries are going to underwrite this. But you can be sure if it doesn't make the mark, it'll fall on it. Every one of you in this room, they have not made a legitimate argument for doing this other than for political expediency. So I can't give you the expertise, which you'll be able to ask these gentlemen and women, but I think it is a political morass that we don't want to pursue, and we have to make our priorities right, and that's having a strong metro system, and we shouldn't be talking about maglev until that's done. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I'm on the policy committee that deals with transportation and the environment. And Tawanda is correct. The governor didn't announce this to the general assembly. He never came to us during the session. He never sent us word at all. It seems to have been trying to get done under the radar. Well, I really appreciate the work of all the citizens who stayed on top of it and really woke everybody up about it. And they're right. I went to the open house at Bowie State University. There were a lot of people there, and they had a lot of legitimate questions. But you would have to walk around and find the right person to ask your question. And they were there, but they were like in this big crowd of people, and they weren't designated as this is where you go to talk to somebody about this or that. And there was no back and forth like an audience. And that's what Alonzo has tried to put together. He invited them, and they didn't come, and then they refused to come. So what Tawana and I have done, as she mentioned, we are, our two committees, on the funding side and on the policy side, are going to bring the transportation agencies before us and ask them, what are they really thinking about doing? What is this? Is this just press releases? Because some people think that's what it is. Is this just like politics? Some people that think, is this actually something anybody's really, truly considering? Well, somebody's spending $27 million to study this. So the Federal Railroad Administration is serious about it, and we have to be serious about it too. And we are going to be serious about it. And as a person on the policy committee, I've been researching the legalities of, because the first thing that I heard from my constituents, the people when I went to community meetings, all different parts of our district, was about the issue of eminent domain. Are they going to be able to take somebody's home and clear it out of the way so that they can build this thing? It looks like that's not what they're talking about. They're talking about going underground for most of the place where the houses are. But we don't know the impact that's going to have on what's above it. We don't know. I mean, I grew up in Pennsylvania. I grew up in coal mine country. I know what it is to be underground. I don't want that to happen to people in our community. And I certainly don't want a railroad company to be able to condemn people's homes so that they can build something. And I'm going to put, on the first day of the session, it's my intention to drop a bill to remove that power from the railroad companies. That has existed in Maryland since the first railroad was built back in the 1830s, when they built the very first railroad in the United States. It was in Maryland. It was the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad. And that, they got all kind of special treatment at the time so that they could build that. And it's been on the books for hundreds of years. And it's been a sleepy thing because they haven't tried to use it recently. People are awake now. And I expect that this is going to be a hot topic in the coming session. And we're going to keep it that way. We're going to keep light and heat on it. And we will be announcing when that public hearing is so that as many people as want to can come down and listen. We are your representatives. They wouldn't come to talk to you. They're going to come to talk to us. And we're going to ask them questions.
Thank you. All right, thank you, Delegates Haley and Senator Pinsky. Really appreciate your remarks. So we're just going to ask a few questions. Currently, as you all know, just to summarize where we are currently, they started. There was a $27 million grant provided from the federal government to MTA to conduct the environmental impact assessment between Baltimore and Prince George's counties. And right now, they are going to have a preliminary report due in January. And that report is going to talk about some of the assessments that they had. But I'm going to ask Mr. Brady to just give a little bit of background on the environmental assessment that's currently happening, or impact study that's currently happening.
Certainly. This is all driven by the NEPA process, which is the Federal National Environmental Protection Act. And this dictates what they have to look at, what they have to evaluate when it comes to whether the project is doable or not. And our NEPA expert also points out the fact that while the end result of the report could be negative, they can still decide to move forward with it if they believe they can remediate or minimize the impact that are identified through the process. So just because it gets a bad score doesn't necessarily mean it doesn't move forward, because that's a decision that's made. And the problem, actually, the last time NAGLEV was here about a decade ago, part of the problem was they did not come up with a final record of opinion on the position. They just set it aside and stopped. So that had they previously said, no, NAGLEV isn't doable in this region, we wouldn't be going through this right now in all likelihood. But it is driven by the federal government. If they look at various aspects of environmental impact that this has, on historic properties, on fish and wildlife, on other things, they're required to look at it. Now, our understanding from the second round of open houses of that $27.6 million grant that they got from the federal government, and in the wording, when Federal Railroad posted in the Federal Register, it was limited to 3 locations in the East Coast: the Pittsburgh area, I believe the Chattanooga, Tennessee area, and Baltimore, Washington, and it was done with the intent of establishing a maglev. So part of the NEPA process requires the comparison of this new project to all other possible alternatives. And this is a point that we argue with them and we challenge them on this. The problem is in the Federal Registry posting, they excluded Excella and Amtrak as a possible viable alternative, so they aren't comparing to see if upgrades to Amtrak could accomplish the goal, because the goal is to build maglev. So we have a contradiction there with regards to the NEPA process, because they are purposely excluding a viable, what we believe is a very viable process. Now, of that grant, we understand that $6 million is being spent on environmental studies. The rest of the money is being, and that's being done by the state, by the contractors for the state, independent of the proponents, BWRR. The remainder of the money is going to BWRR to actually design the system. And their first round of maps were rather vague, didn't have much detail. We corrected that, and in Linthicum, the BWRR representative said, now, there are some maps out there that are unofficial. You should only look at the ones that are on our site, because the other ones have errors on it. So when I spoke, I raised my hand and said, I'm very proud of the maps that we did, and they're much better than what they did. We are getting ready to put out new maps here shortly. We're in the final stages, where we have taken their 3 current routes, the BW Parkway East, BW Parkway West, and the Amtrak route. And we are, based upon a Federal Railroad study of 2012, it's on noise and vibration of maglev trains. And we're going to be putting up, take their proposed routes, and we're going to add the distance for the vibration and add the distance for noise, especially above ground noise is interesting. Those will be pushed out on our website very shortly. But the whole process is, and you mentioned you thought January was when we understood, and I thought we were told at the open houses that it's been pushed back to late next year or the following January. So they've got a lot to do. By law, they only give us 30 days. Once they finish the report, they give us 30 days to review it, not us, but everyone. The open comment period is 30 days. We've already asked for 45, and we may be, depending upon how thick it is, we may ask for 60 or even 90. That's going to be a big fight that we'll have when they finally put it. But Brandon Bratcher, the contact point at Federal Railroad I know at the Laurel High School open house, he said that it's already been pushed back and it's not going to be the end of next calendar year, maybe January of 19 that they're talking about it coming out. So we've got some time to fight this even more. So that they're in the process based upon, it's kind of iterative process, because at the open houses, they showed the maps, but they didn't have the information about the substations. They didn't have any information about any of the ventilation or emergency access hatches and passes for that. They lacked a lot of detail, and they need that to feed into the environmental, because without knowing the extent of the system, exactly where it routes through, you don't know if it's going to damage where it goes underground. Is it going to have an impact on the aquifers up down here and up in, especially up in the Baltimore area? You don't know what impact it will have to, say, the Tuxet wildlife or things like that. So it's an iterative process as they become more specific in the design that can be more detailed in the analysis. And the one disappointing part of what they've done, and Bradley Smith, I think it is, of MTA stated that they cannot do any economic analysis until they get down to the single route. And we challenge that. We believe that, yes, there's going to be uniqueness associated with either of the three routes that are selected, but the starting point is going to be the same, the ending point is going to be the same, and the mileage is going to be very similar, so they should be able to start the economic analysis. So they're not even, they've stated emphatically that they won't even start the economic analysis until after they get down to the single route proposed. So we've got some challenges. We are suspicious about what's going on. I think we see some of the political influence going on. So it's problematic on our part. I'm going to pass this off, just one back. One thing. Write this down. Let me give you my email address. Because if you have any questions after this, or if you want us to come to your group and speak, shoot me an email, put in the subject matter, SC Maglev, and I'll get back to you. But it's Kathy with a K, K-A-T-H-Y, the letter N as in November, Dennis, D-E-N-N-I-S, at Verizon.net. It's my wife's name and letter N, my name at Verizon.net. Kathy and Dennis at Verizon.net. SC Maglev in the title line, and ask what you want, give me your contact information, we'll get back to you. And we'd be more than happy, Bill and I and other members of our group, to come and speak to your groups if you'd like.
Thank you. So I know there's going to be, you give a round of applause, sure. I know there's a lot of questions out in the room, and folks want to speak up on this issue and ask us some questions. But I'm just going to, we do have Matt out here. Matt, want to raise your hand? He's going to come around to you, so raise your hand, and he'll come to you and give you an opportunity to speak and to ask a question. We do want to limit the question to a minute to 30 seconds to a minute, just so we can give them a proper opportunity to answer the questions for you. And we're going to go around the room until they kick us out. So what I do want to ask, Matt, you can come to this group right over here. But I do want to ask Dr. Zhang a question. If you could just speak a little bit to the community impact of this type of magnetic levitation lines. I know that you say it varies and it's very difficult to assume what it would be. But can you just talk a little bit about noise, vibrations, things of that nature that folks probably will want to know about? I mean, I know they're considering taking these lines underground, over 150 feet or more, or whatever that is. If you could just speak to that a little bit, the impact, that'd be great.
Sure, I'll be happy to do that, but hopefully without taking too much time, I want to follow up on the environmental impact study, because these are the very issues that a comprehensive environmental impact study is supposed to address, including the ones that Delegate Washington just mentioned. And also the typical questions from the communities about the impact on noise, vibration, and because it's maglev, it tends to be could be high speed based on what I read about it. So the air turbulence, then certainly impact on property values, as well as economic development, on communities, and all these different things, and natural resources, wildlife, and habitats, ecosystems, and all these different things. And the current alignment does have both tunneled segments as well as above ground segments. And one thing I want to say is that maglev, as some has already mentioned, that is not entirely new technology, but it is new to the United States. The concept was developed several decades ago, and as I mentioned, the first commercial operation started 13 years ago in Shanghai, China. Then other places have proposed it, but it's also a technology that's evolving very quickly. So for instance, more recently there has also been actually implemented maglevs that uses a slower speed or moderate speed maglev technology that does not shoot for 250 or 300 miles per hour, that operates more around 80, 100 miles per hour, that it makes its impact. So without knowing the exact technology that they're going to put into the place, it's hard to put numbers on it. But in general, the noise level has a lot to do with the speed of the train and how far away you are from the train. So the operating speed has an impact on a train. For instance, if a maglev train, typical maglev train operates at its high end of the speed range, around 250 or 300 miles per hour, it's almost like you are standing right next to a big 18-wheeler truck, a big truck right next to you, running right past you. But if it's operating only at 200 kilometers per hour or 140 miles per hour, it's probably more like your next door neighbor mowing his lawn in his or her backyard. There is quite some difference in the noise level depending on the speed of train when it passes a community. Then in terms of economic impact on property values or jobs, who gets the benefit is also important. There has been a lot of documentation of what's referred to as the tunnel effect of high-speed rail project. It doesn't matter if it's maglev or more traditional technologies. So if there is a station in a community, it tends to have a very significant positive impact on property value and businesses. I think everyone understands that, just based on how much it takes to rent an apartment, depending on how close it is to a metro station. But if a community is only getting passed by a train, then the impact is probably less. In terms of positive impact, is much less compared to that if a community is close to the station itself. So it depends. So the alignment, I think it's great that this community is trying to get more information on the actual alignment and station design of the route. And I think when that comes out, then it'll be probably more clear as to what the direction of impact would be. But there are a lot of issues like operating costs that many have mentioned. It is typically not a cheap project to build. That is why it's not everywhere around the world. And the operating cost is also a factor. Usually the energy cost. So this thing takes a lot of electricity. For those of you who really cares about the environment, and so it depends on the source of electricity generation. So 2/3 of its operating costs come from the energy it takes to run these trains, and the rest come from maintenance, as well as the staffing and other support going to the system. So I'll stop right there, and I'll be happy to answer any more specific questions about impact on the community or other aspects of the technology itself. So I'll try to do my best to provide the objective information on the technology to this community.
We appreciate that. Thank you. So we have a question. Yeah, sure. Yes. You want to say your name and then maybe the city that you're from?
Yes, I'm Scott Snell from Greenbelt. My questions, I have two of them for you, Dr. Zhang. One of them is, you mentioned about noise. As you may see from the map here, the entrance to the tunnel is relatively close to Greenbelt in some of these possible routes. And entering and exiting the tunnel at high speed could presumably cause a lot of noise, create a loud sound. I'm thinking of the West Hyattsville Metro station on the Green Line. There was some trouble in the community. I think they slowed the trains now so that when they enter and exit, it doesn't cause that shock wave quite so much. But I wonder if you could speak on that. And then my other question is, my understanding is that a maglev system works best in a straight line, essentially. And yet this is a curved one, I guess, for right-of-way purposes. I wonder if you might have some comment. I assume they made some sort of compromise on a pure engineering route. It would go straight from Union Station up to BWI, and not follow the curve of BW Parkway. Anyway.
Thank you.
Sure, I'll be happy to take a first step on it and invite all my fellow panelists to chime in afterwards. So to answer your second question first, in terms of just look at engineering side of it, engineering design side of it, maglev does have some uniqueness, or it is different from wheel-based technology. And you specifically asked a question about the radius requirement, minimum radius requirement, which is a very important design parameter for rail system. So this is when the train makes a turn follow the track at a specific speed. If we need to make a turn or change the direction of the movement, what is the minimum radius that needs to be designed? But in that regard, maglev, because it uses a very different propulsion and stopping, braking technology, it actually has a relatively smaller radius requirement. So it does, in theory, it offers some advantage in terms of that you can use a smaller radius at the same operating speed, and then you can use a higher grade, you can tolerate a higher grades levels than a typical wheel-based technology at high speed. So these are some of the pros of the technology from the engineering design point of view. I don't have the background information on the specific alignment design or rail track alignment design, geometric design, passed in this community. But these are just some of the typical engineering features of the technology. In terms of the noise, as you mentioned, I think you're already aware, the speed makes a significant difference operating, and also the design of the tunnel. Certainly also, the entrance of the tunnel also should make a difference. And in this regard, I really do not have an example that I can cite for you. The entire commercially operated maglev train line in Shanghai is all above ground on an elevated infrastructure. It does not actually has a tunnel as far as I know it. So it depends on the design, but unfortunately, I do not have an example that I can refer to you on whether the noise has become an issue at the tunnel entrance of a maglev technology.
Thank you. We have another question right over here. So you want to introduce yourself and wait for it?
Hi, I'm John Kolosinski from Greenbelt. I have a couple questions. One of them is, do we know what the minimum distance of the tunnel is relative to the ground level? The second thing I'd like to know more about is underground. I mean, ground is more of a transmitter of sound and vibration than areas, and I'm kind of wondering, for ground vibrations, what the distance, what the impact area for that would be. And lastly, I'm reminded of an earthquake that we had here a number of years ago, and I'm wondering what tunneling does in terms of making us more prone to fractures and disruption and shock waves from an earthquake.
Great questions. Do we have any responses? Thank you, Mr. Brady.
To answer the part of the question about the vibrations, in the Federal Railroad Administration paper that we're using, they provide information specific to the maglev for ground-borne vibrations. It depends on the type of soil and how well that the soil, I believe it has to do with how compacted the soil is and what composes the soil as to how efficient of a transmitter of the vibrations it is. So we will be able to address that using a conservative estimate for that.
Any other responses? Okay. Do we have another question? Oh, right. Sorry about that.
The eagles in the wetlands.
It was actually a three-part, though, wasn't it? In the beginning of the summer, middle of the summer, BWRR was saying that the tunnels would be 60 to 90 feet down. More towards this fall, they started saying the tunnels would be 100 to 100 feet down. So we don't really know. We do know, based on the some diagrams that they have provided, that the approximate diameter of the tunnel from the inside wall to the other inside wall is 43 feet. What we don't know right now is how thick are the walls and is there other material on the outside of the wall. So it could be anywhere, the complete tunnel width, anywhere from 46 to 50, 55 feet. So given that, at the bottom of the tunnel, feet down, that means it's 50 feet below your house if you do not have a basement. So one of the things that we're going to be doing is, excuse me?
Can you repeat that statement again that you said?
The question was how are they going to dig this? They have mentioned that they're going to be using boring machines that'll do the tunneling down in. I mean, I'm sure at some point when the tunnels are coming up out of the ground, they're going to have to, do the trench and fill because it won't be efficient to use the boring machine to some extent. So, one of the things that we're going to be doing for maps is we're going to be figuring out, and we're working with a physicist to work out the mathematics and make sure that we've got them correctly and that we understand them so that they can be mapped, is we'll figure out what is the horizontal distance it takes the train to reach a certain depth. So an example is it'll take between 1,200 to 1,300 feet of horizontal distance to reach a bottom of the tunnel depth of about 100 feet. So that means that after 1,200 to 1,300 feet, at that point, if you do not have a basement, then they're about 50 feet below your house. But something else we're going to be using is we have digital elevation models for the GIS, so we can take into account the elevation of the surface. And as far as the fault line goes, I don't think they're going to be going deep enough to where it's going to cause any issues for, that might bring on an earthquake. However, if there is an earthquake, it could cause issues for the tunnel. I guess it depends a lot on what they constructed it.
Thank you. Next question. Right here.
Jerry Stone, I live in Bigger Hill, South Laurel. There are currently 3 route alternatives, each of which is somewhat underground, and other stretches are above ground. And in our neighborhood, they're above ground. So my question is, at what point can we raise issues about there being an alternative to the alternative? In other words, if we're saying in layman's terms, we like this west route to be underground, does that require the creation of a new alternative? And at what point in the current process does that become not possible just because of the milestones in the process?
That's a good question. The evaluation of alternatives is driven by their analysis, if you will. The one thing we do know is that they're excluding one that we believe is important, and that is the Amtrak. But more importantly is, and as I said, the scoping period ended earlier this year, and we have been, and others have been arguing that it needs to be open, and they've assured us, MTA has assured us, that when individuals or groups write and raise issues, they will add that to what they're looking at. So what I would suggest would be, as soon as you can, I would pen a letter making those kinds of suggestions, send it to MTA, send it to Federal Railroad, and copy your state and elected officials as well as the governor. And I do the county elected officials too. And if you live in a municipality, contact your municipal officials too. But whether they add or look at other alternatives is really driven by people making suggestions. And at one of their meetings that DWRR hosted, I don't know if they were being cavalier or not, but they said, if you think of a better route than these 6, this is before they limited it down to 3, they said, suggest it and we'll look at it. So I'm not certain they were honest with that, but if you make a suggestion and you put it in a letter and send it to them, it's part of the record, and they'll have to respond to that. So as far as that is concerned, there's no real way to force them to look at an alternative, but the best thing you can do is write and make that suggestion.
Thank you. We're going to take the next question right back here.
Hi, it's Alan Greenbelt. The Acela train was mentioned and the tracks that already go from DC to Baltimore. You said that that was excluded from the federal contract, but you had looked at it as a viable alternative. Could you talk about that a little bit and how we might frame that as a, like, why don't we go this way if we need more rapid transit to between DC and Baltimore? Thank you.
Sure, I'm happy to. I don't think we wanted to include any additional projects. We just wanted to kill this one. And I don't think, I know I haven't looked at any other alternatives.
Thank you, Delegate Gaines. Delegate Gaines, while you have the next real quick, while you have the mic, if you could answer the question, because there's been some things out there that have said that the federal government is willing to give $5 billion for the project, and then there's another company willing to give another $5 billion. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Sure. What we know is they claim, at least this is earlier before, when they only had 40% of their routes were in tunnels. Now they're up to about 70%. But back earlier this year, they were talking about $10 billion to build the route from DC to Baltimore. And of that, $5 billion, they said, was coming from the Bank of Japan as a loan. We don't know the terms, we don't know any of the details. Recently, they added that they were looking to get a $5 billion loan from the Federal Railroad Infrastructure Program. And I can tell you, Saturday a week ago, Senator Cardin was shocked when I told him that. So they are looking to borrow money in order to build this, and we believe that the cost is now up to about $17 billion, or we would use a range of 10 to 17. And let me add a couple of things. I told you they want to go from Washington to New York. If you use the 40 miles of the existing project, then that translates into a $50 to $80 billion building program. And if they go from Charlotte to Boston, that's $200 to $350 billion to build it. And I have no idea where that money is coming from. And our biggest concern, and as these routes drop off, our group is very glad that we aren't losing supporters. What I mean by that is the route that there were two devastating routes that went through a major part of Bowie and went down to Glenarden and Glendale and the like. And most of the people that were up in arms over that are still with us, because we went from NIMBY, when we first looked at it, to looking at the economics of this, and we don't believe it will work without heavy subsidies from the government. There are only 3 operating. There's two in China, or under construction, 2 under construction in China. There's 1 operating in China, 1 operating in Japan. And all of those are heavily subsidized by their government. And our fear, and what we maintain, is if the model is consistent, they will be heavily subsidized here. And guess where the money is going to come from? It's going to come from Amtrak, it's going to come from Metro, it's going to come from the light rail up in Baltimore, it's going to come from interstates, bridges and roads and what have you. So it's, you know, as an elected official, I had a problem with the governor raiding the HUR funds. You remember that issue, right? Oh yes, yes. No. But it's a small problem. You know, whenever you reduce that. But if you add a new infrastructure that's going to sap away a lot of that money, you're creating a bigger problem that's not necessary without any real benefit. And we also believe that as an alternative, Amtrak's Acela, next generation Acela, if it goes forward, they've got a plan to implement it in the coming decade or so. If they implement it, they will achieve speeds of about 247 miles an hour, which is comparable to the 311 that maglev is claiming. and it's already on, for the most part, existing infrastructure. So it has negative or minimal impact on the communities it goes to because it's already going through the communities.
Thank you. Next question. I think we have one right in the back. If you can come up a little bit so we can see you. Kind of under. Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Warner from Greenbelt. Citizens in Greenbelt have worked very, very hard to protect the last remaining woodland area that is a fragment of the original green belt of trees that surrounded our town when it was first built. I'm very, very concerned about the impact of the proposed route that would go through that woodland if it were built west of the BW Parkway. And I'm wondering if you, Dennis, or anyone else on the panel can speak to exactly what those impacts might be on that woodland area. If anybody has thought about that specifically, how much of the existing trees would be cut down. It looks like it would go through Blueberry Hill, which is a rare pine barrens ecosystem in the state of Maryland. And you know, that area is also a riparian buffer around the creek that flows into Indian Creek back there. So there's a lot of ecological impacts, and I'm wondering if you can speak to that specifically.
So the state has a lot of protection programs in place, and it may be in one of the open space programs, or we could definitely look into ways of adding additional protections before. Maybe that's something we should probably do this session, to definitely look at figuring out ways to add additional protections to be sure that they'll have no opportunity to cut down any trees or board areas.
Next question right over here.
Hello, Crystal Orlando from...
I'm sorry, did you want to answer? Oh. Yes, thank you. Sure, go ahead. 1 second, man.
You were asking about what the impact would be to the land. Well, we don't know how many trees that it would take down, but from what I understand, from what I've read, where the tunnel comes out, they would require anywhere from 1 to 1.5 acres of open space to accommodate the tunnel, the infrastructure, whatever supporting equipment they may need access to it. The right-of-way, according to BWRR, the width of the path that the above-ground sections take is 72 feet. So you would have a 70 to 72-foot wide swath of land. Now, you know, what they do with that afterwards, who knows? They can make a hiking and biking trail, which they showed us pictures of and tried to explain to us the synergy that existed between the two. That was pretty much the reaction. You know, so there